long division. So for long division, this is basically just dividing up a number like you would normally divide up a number, but now we have a multi-digit number, and we obviously don't want to be drawing 1,254 dots and circles and things like that. So this is a way to be able to work through a number and divide larger numbers. The main thing to remember when we're doing long division is the steps. It's really all that you need to remember. The steps are to divide, multiply, subtract, check, and then this says bring down, but I'm actually going to change that to bring up, and I will explain that in a little while. In order to remember those steps, there's a silly saying to help us remember that, and that silly saying is, does McDonald's sell cheeseburgers? And I always say yes, obviously they do. They're really yummy, and that helps me to remember it. My steps of divide, multiply, subtract, check, and bring up, and I'll explain that in a little while. Up above, we are labeling those different parts. So if you had seen in previous videos, the inside number, the number that's being broken up, is going to be called the dividend. The number out in front, I say, knocking on that door, and we're going to go into that story a little bit more as I go through this long division. That number is called the divisor. The number up on top is the answer we're going to find. That is the quotient. And then this is the first time that we've seen this bar here. This is called the remainder. And if you notice, we cannot use a calculator for long division. We've got to be able to work through this, so you've got to know this process for it. Okay, so we're going to take this problem and we are going to work through it. And when I rewrite this problem, I'm going to write the numbers fairly spaced apart. And you'll see why as I go through that. Now going through that story that I had talked about with it being super hot outside, that it's like a summer in Virginia, I want you to again picture that. This number inside, the 1,254, is inside the house, kind of chilling out, but each digit is actually in its own room. So I'm kind of separating the rooms there. And then this 8 is outside, kind of knocking on the door, trying to get in. It's trying to work its way through the rooms, basically because the coolest room is in the back of the house. So it's trying to work its way to the back of the house, okay? And we need to remember those steps of does McDonald's sell cheeseburgers? But that doesn't actually stand for that. It stands for divide, multiply, subtract, check, and bring up. So let's get through it. So first we're going to try and have 8 go into 1, go into the room 1. If I don't know my multiples, it might be helpful to write out my multiples on the side. So I'm going to do that over here. 8, 16, 24. Okay, and I'm going to say, well, when I go through my 8s, how many times do I need to go through to get me to 1? Well, I can't. My first time is 8, and that's too high for 1. So it goes in 0 times, and I just divide it. Now I'm going to multiply. Well, what 2 numbers do I multiply? Well, going back to that story, the 8 is trying to get in through the door, and I know it's kind of silly, but picture this 0 also trying to get into that room, but this one is trying to get in through the window. It is so hot outside. So we're going to multiply those 2 numbers that are trying to get into the room. It is the 8 and the 0, and 8 times 0 is 0. So we're going to put that underneath the room. We're working our way through it. We just multiplied. Now we're going to subtract, and we're subtracting the numbers that are already set up for us. The 1 minus 0 1 minus 0 is 1. So I subtracted. Now I'm going to check. And when I check, I'm checking to see that my 1, my difference, is smaller than the 8, is smaller than the divisor. If it's not smaller, if it's the same or larger than the divisor, that means that I could have gone into that room more times and I need to work through those steps. My division, I got to go back through those last 3 steps and see where I made a mistake. But here, 1 is smaller than 8, so it checks out. And here's where I said that I'm going to bring up. Instead of bringing down, like it's traditionally we've heard, I'm going to bring up. So this 1 is going to go into the next room. It's going to go in through the front door here of the room. And it is going to come in and make a 12. So now I've brought it up. And I'm going to say, well, how many times can 8 go into 12? So I'm going to say, well, 16 is too much. I was able to go in 1 time. That's my division. And then I'm going to multiply. And I'm going to multiply the 8 and the 1 that are trying to get into that room. 8 times 1 is 8. And then I'm going to subtract. 12 minus 8 is 4. And I'm going to say, well, is 4 smaller than 8? Yes, it's smaller. I checked it. And then I'm going to bring up. So 4 is going to go into the next room, in front of the next digit, and make a 45. Now I'm going to divide again. And I'm going to say, well, how many times can 8 go into 45? Well, 48's too much. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And I just divided. I'm going to multiply. I'm going to multiply 8 and 5. I don't know what 8 times 5 is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, it's 40. And then I'm going to subtract. 45 minus 40 is 5. Then I'm going to check. Is 5 smaller than 8? Yes, it is. And then I'm going to bring up, and that 5 is going to go into the next room and make a 54. Now I'm going to do the same thing again. And I'm going to say, okay, well, 56 is too much. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Went in 6 times. Now I'm going to multiply 8 times 6. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 48. Okay, I just multiplied. Now I'm going to subtract. 54 minus 48. 4 minus 8. I can't do that, so I've got to go to 5 and borrow. I'm borrowing a group of 10, so it becomes a 14. 14 minus 8 is 6. 4 minus 4 is 0. And now I would normally, oh, I'm sorry, I almost skipped. I subtracted. Now I'm going to check. Is 6 smaller than 8? Yes, 6 is smaller than 8. So I can keep going. And normally I would bring up, but there's no room to bring up to. So this would go all the way up and become my remainder, which would be a 6. So my total quotient, I put this all together, my total quotient would be 1, 5, 6, remainder 6, which would be 156, remainder 6. So we learned how to do long division, the steps of long division, and how to get a quotient with a remainder. I would suggest practicing this without remainders first, and then go on to remainders and go from there. So good luck with that.